So it's been a year since I've started doing film photography, and in that year I've learned a lot. And in this video I want to give you some tips that I've learned so that it could help expedite your journey into film photography. Hi, my name is Chris. I am a Washington, D.C. based concert and portrait photographer as well as a commercial videographer. And without further ado, let's get right into the tips. So let's start with tip number one. Be open to learning. There is always something to learn about photography, and film photography is no different. Learning things like terminology when it comes to dropping off your images, from picking your film stocks to all sorts of other things. There is so much to learn. So when I started doing film photography, one of the things that I learned was that when I dropped off my film, they would take my negatives and they would cut it. And what I learned is how to get my film cut in a way that makes it easy for me to archive later. So cutting them into groups of 4 or 6 if I'm shooting in 35mm, or groups of 3 if I'm shooting in medium format. We'll get more into that later, but this is just kind of an overall example of the things that you learn as you do more and more film photography. So being open to learning more about the format and how it works and the process of picking up film all the way to putting away your film is super helpful. The next thing I would recommend is experimenting. So there are so many variables when it comes to film photography. There are so many different types of film out there, and there are so many different cameras to shoot with. Being open to experimenting and figuring out what works for you is one of the most important things that I can recommend for you. One way that I experiment is by trying different formats of film. So there is 35mm film, which you will normally find at your local drugstore. It's a small film that you would find inside a point and shoot camera. And then there's medium format film, which is a larger format, and it produces these larger negatives compared to 35mm that lead to a larger image as far as resolution. So if I'm doing work that is highly detailed, such as of portraits, I tend to use medium format, also commonly known as 120 film. Think of it as using a bigger sensor. The bigger the sensor, the more information you could pack onto that area. So that's why I use 120 or medium format film sometimes for my work. Depending on what I'm trying to shoot, I go back and forth between the two formats, but do whatever makes you feel happy. Experiment, try out new things, and you'll be able to discover what works for you. So one of the big things that I will say is exposure is key to your photos, especially when it comes to film. You don't want to underexpose your film so much that it becomes unable to see, and you don't want to overexpose it to the point where your image is completely blown out. Having a light meter of some sort is going to be very critical for you to expose your images properly. And depending on what camera you use, you might have a light meter built into your camera, or you might have to use an external device, or you might have to use an app. So I use an app on my phone called My Light Meter, and it allows me to plug in various settings on the phone, such as the aperture, the ISO of the film, and the shutter speed. And by doing that, it allows me to calculate the correct exposure for my film. And if I decide to purposefully under or overexpose my film, then I can calculate for that as well. It's a great app. I love it. It works. But if you can get also a physical light meter that also works, whatever helps you get that exposure, having some sort of meter helps. Okay, so with all that said, is there anything else that I've learned in the last year that I found helpful? Yeah. So I have discovered that by shooting with various film stocks, I tend to prefer vibrant colors and I prefer nice crisp images. So when I look at different film stocks, the one that I tend to gravitate more towards is Kodak Ektar 100. It produces these bright, saturated, colorful shots that fit my style as far as editing. So having that as a starting point or just as a end result is perfect for me. There is Kodak Tri-X 400, which is the classic black and white film, and it's lovely. what I've started to find out as I've been experimenting is that I am opening up to Kodak T-Max, which is a more contrasty version of the black and white film. So I'm just learning and experimenting just like the rest of you. So go ahead and play around with different film stocks and find out what you like. So I love my Mamiya RB67. It is a tank. It is a brilliant medium format camera, and I love the images that it produces. However, because it is so heavy, I don't often use it for street photography, but that doesn't mean I don't use it for street photography. The fact that I can switch between color and black and white film at any moment by switching the film back is very useful, but I'm discovering that when I'm out and about, I tend to prefer the flexibility and the lighter weight of 35mm film. Not only is it helpful that I get 36 images to a roll compared to the 10 that I get out of the Mamiya RB67, but it's just a lot lighter to travel with, and it allows me to make sure that my shots are a lot more steady when I'm holding it handheld. I don't always want to be carrying a tripod when I'm with the Mamiya RB67, so while it does help, sometimes it's just more trouble than it's worth, and the image that I would get out of the 35mm camera is more than good enough for wherever the image might just end up, if it's just going to be on social media anyway. Finally, practice helps. So by going out and trying different film stocks and trying different styles and shooting different things, you start to get into a pattern and a process of figure out what works best for you. So in my case, I'm using my Nikon F100 more, I'm using the Olympus XA2 a lot more, and I am trying to find different film stocks that work with my RB67 so I could see what looks different compared to a 35mm shot as far as just detail and lens selection and lens choices and options. So it's just mixing and matching, but practice, 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 and you'll be sure to improve. But that's it for this video. I hope what I said helped. If you have any suggestions or any tips that you would like to share, be sure to leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, be sure to hit the like button. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, be sure to hit subscribe. My name is Chris. I am ChrisWorks everywhere. And until I decide to make another video, I will see you in the next one.